Peace. What's good, YouTube? It's Kareem Samadi back again with another video. So, perception is reality. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what you see, what you choose to see, what you desire to see, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, is your reality, right? Or what you choose to accept, what you buy into on a daily basis, is going to become your reality over time, right? Simply because of the fact that you are allowing it to enter into your being. Now, when I first heard this saying, it was in Marine Corps basic training. And at the time, the drill instructors were only saying it because, or at least I thought they were saying it because if they saw us doing something that we weren't supposed to be doing, then we were, or they thought that we were, then we were able to be punished for it. But quotes like that are very symbolic, same way that pictures are, so they have infinite meaning. Now, they could have been applying it in many different places. I've heard it used in many different ways. It wasn't just used in that context by the drill instructors, but it was also used when it came to how they were describing how we were supposed to be as Marines in terms of character. So, and I've heard it many different times outside of that as well. And the reason why I've heard it many different times is simply because of the fact that depending on what we choose to see in our reality, it can be applied in many different ways. And so this is really important. I felt the need to make this video simply because of the fact that this is something that we really need to understand in a year like 2023, or in these times really, right? This is something that we really need to understand, is getting into our spiritual power, tapping into our spiritual reality, because well, you know, a lot of times we like to talk about how there's a matrix and, you know, things that we consider larger than us are mind controlling us, nothing, you know, but listen, that's still your perception, because there's just as many people who are saying it's a matrix and there's nothing you can do, or that's a bleak reality, it's not real. There's just as many people as saying the exact opposite, saying that, hey, life's good, you know, there's great things here, the world is great, I'm having a great time, you know, things are only going to get better. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a fully optimistic look. No, you have to balance out the optimism with true perception. You have to balance out your optimism, right? And you don't want to lie to yourself. You want to be objective, and that's okay. You can be objective, and you can choose your perception based off of your objectivity, rather than accepting what's given to you and choosing to see things that way. See, everything that exists in I would say media, right? Especially social media, right? Memes, for example. All these things are meant to change your perception on certain topics. Whenever anything blows up or goes to trending, it's meant to change your perception on certain topics. The way you're taught in schools meant to change your perception on certain topics. And along with changing your perception on these topics, now you have a certain reality playing out for you. So that can mean good things, and that can mean things that are detrimental to you. It really all depends on what you choose to see. Things that happen to you, traumas that happen to you, people that treat you wrong, right? Think about things like that, because those things, how you choose to respond after traumas happen to you, also shapes your reality. Because what have I said in previous videos? Our subconscious mind, which, you know, creates our reality, is programmed by trauma, repetition, and symbols. So when we are dealing with certain traumas, whether it's things that are, you know, that traumatize us in good or bad ways, that happen to us, or whether it's things that we see, you know, that affect the subconscious mind on a level that we may not understand consciously, right? Whatever the case may be, it's still seeping in, because the subconscious mind doesn't reason. Whether or not you agree with something or not, subconscious mind doesn't care. It sees things as objective. So it's going to take in what it takes in. Now, your conscious mind is meant to filter things. Your ego is meant to filter things so that the wrong stuff doesn't get into your subconscious mind. So you also always have a choice, right? See, the ego has its role. Its role is to prevent your reality from constantly changing from second to second based off of everything that you interact with in your reality. It's meant to keep you grounded. The problem arises when we over-identify with it. So what we have to understand when it comes to changing our reality is that all we really have to do is change our perception. That's really it. So yeah, you can say that the world's a matrix, right? And that can be very much true. There's enough evidence that you can find to change your perception to see that it's true. And there's nothing wrong with seeing the world as a matrix. I see the world as a matrix too. Now, how you see that matrix, whether it's in your control or whether it's in somebody else's control, is up to you, right? See, because when it comes to there's a lot of weird information, a lot of misguiding information, in my opinion, out there about new spiritual topics, because there's a lot of people coming into spirituality now, more so now than ever, because of the new age of Aquarius. So but and now that all that DNA is coming online, there can still be a lot of misguiding. There can still be a lot of things integrated into that to try to steer your perception into something lower, something that doesn't necessarily serve you. So that's where you got people talking about that there's many different types of entities running the matrix, when in reality, or running the matrix or out to get you, whatever the case may be, right? And I'm sure anybody can find enough evidence if they really wanted to make these things true, right? Because it's very easy to change your reality. It's once you understand what I'm saying, it's going to be shockingly, it's almost scary how huge the changes can really be based off of your perception, based off of what gets into your subconscious mind. So we just have to be aware of what we're feeding our subconscious mind. We have to choose what we're choosing to ingest with our subconscious mind, right? And I've learned this lesson. It took me a little while to understand this lesson, right? But I learned it I didn't really mature into it until like last year, but I learned it a while ago. It just took a while for it to digest, because certain things, they take a little. You hear it, but it doesn't digest until later. Spiritual information sometimes works like that, right? So a lot, one example I'm going to use is, I went from blaming a lot of people for my problems, for how I acted, or for, this is probably something that's relatable, when bad things happen to you, when, you go through a bad point in your life, rough times in your life, you want to blame everything but yourself, and I'm not saying you should always self-blame. No, we're going to get into that later. But when it comes to the things that happen, you want to blame everything, and so that's what I was doing. I wasn't really taking accountability for my place in things, for my control of things. I was always saying, hey, in some way, shape, or form, I'm not wrong here. In some way, shape, or form, this happened to me, rather than this occurred simply because of the fact that, I chose to let this occur in some way, shape, or form. I'm responsible for being in a situation. I have problems with responsibility, and that trickled down to, my perception of other people. And because of my inability to accept responsibility, I ended up projecting that onto others, because my reality was people were out to get me, and man, if any of you have ever been in that mindset that you think everyone is out to get you, right? Or no one understands you. That's another one. Or that that it's love is dead, or something like that, something along those lines, or that it's just like there's no relationships to be had, that it's everybody else's fault, it's the world's fault, right? People are at new lows, right? And you want to say it's everything but you, but your perception, right? I chose to say things like that, at one point in time in my life. And that did nothing for me but reinforce it. So I began to see things just like that. I began to really feel like everybody really was out to get me, and it played out. Like these things, like things like this, they happened. You know what I mean? They occurred to me. And so when I'm talking about how your perception changes your reality, I'm not just blowing smoke. You know, I have real life experience with this. You know, like I said, you know, a lot of people are out to misguide you, but this is type of information I feel like everybody needs to have based off my experience, simply because of the fact that, you know, it's critical. It's very much critical, you know, and I would rather everybody know about it than not know about it, or people will be able to replay this video and come to an understanding. And so, yeah, I really did feel like everybody was out to get me. I really did feel like, you know, love was dead at one point. And it was because I was choosing to reinforce that. I noticed that at that time, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos that reinforced those thoughts. I was scouring the internet to find things that reinforce those thoughts. You know, I was surrounding myself with people that reinforce those same thoughts. You see, and that added to the repetition, along with with what it might have initially been the catalyst, you know, which was the initial trauma, right? But we had to understand that that initial trauma is a lesson. So when we see it as a lesson, rather than seeing it as, okay, this is something that happened to me, right? But when we see it as a lesson, we learn from it, we move on from it, then it doesn't, and we choose to do that, right? Then it doesn't affect us nearly as much as when you internalize it and you start carrying it with you and making a new reality based off of what happened to you. And it may not have even happened to you, right? So, because you can see a lot of different circles, right? A lot of different communities centered around victimhood, centered around blaming another party, right? I can go down the list, right? And, those TRP guys, men going their own way, feminism, right? Another one would be Black Lives Matter, right? Not saying that I don't support my own people, but what Black Lives Matter turned out to be, and really what it became is different than the overall message, right? There's a lot of other ones, right? Political parties, for example, right? Centered around blame, centered around victimhood. And when it trickles down, now you got groups of people divided, separated, and at each other's throats because they have different worldviews, right? Everything, we have to really understand any form of separation that we find, it's going to be reinforced in some way or another by somebody who wants to affect other people's perceptions because they feel like they might be able to gain from it, which they can, right? You'd be very shocked to understand how easy it is to manipulate people based off of their emotions, based off of their feelings about certain critical topics that might have emotionally scarred them, right? And that type of stuff is easy to generate entire realities on. Even with spirituality, even with, like I said, I made that video about the spiritual scam and the agenda behind that, right? And it's to keep people on the same page. Even with wars, propaganda, all types of things meant to change your perception. And by changing your perception, your reality becomes different. A lot of people seem to think that the United States is like the center of the world, right? People that live in the United States think it's the center of the world. And as a result, it's common if you've ever been to another country, or if you've seen how Americans act in other countries, right? They act very uneducated of other countries because they've been fed perceptions and stereotypes, and as a result, they have a false impression of what reality really is over there. And so that's why I say perception really does change your reality. Your perception of yourself changes your reality too. If you have this look that you're a helpless person, right? you're going to feel helpless. If you have the outlook that you are depressed, you're going to reinforce feeling depressed. If you have the outlook that you are lacking in some area, right? You are going to feel that lack. You're going to feel that lack of abundance. You're going to feel poor. If you have the outlook on there's no opportunities for me, then you're not going to see opportunities, right? If you have the outlook that it's impossible for you to connect with people, it's impossible for you to find love, it's impossible for people to understand you. If you have the outlook that people are always going to treat you a certain way, and there's certain things that can be subconscious, right? This is why we have people that have, they develop, like obsessive disorders, right? They develop, things that make them very manipulative in relationships, or make them very manipulative when dealing with people in professional environments, whatever the case may be, simply because, people are fighting for that control of the reality that they bought into, right? Why do you think a lot of TV shows are geared towards reinforcing, certain very popular things? It's to change your perception on those things, right? So we got to be aware of that. News, to change your perception, to keep everybody's perception on the same page. I'm keeping it real, right? You could be an avid watcher of the news. Sure. If you enjoy it, by all means, but we got to be real here, because most of the news, let's be real, is bad news. So if you watch the news enough, you will find yourself going crazy and feeling like the world is a bad place. And you're basically, you may not be very obsessive over it, but some people who watch the news all the time, they basically walk around in a bubble because they're so fearful of the world, so fearful of what the world is going to be like. People who watch the news a lot usually have the outlook that the sky is falling down. Something's happening. Why do you think a big thing is that we're in end times? Everything is going away. It's to change your perception. There's a new world, 5D, change your perception, and to create a reality, right? And it's truly everything, right? Even when salesmen come up to you, they have to change your perception to get you to really want to buy that product, and there's a lot of tactics on it. Really changing your perception. Once you choose to change your perception, because you always have the choice, right? You change your perception, you change everything. And I mean everything. Your reality will align, because when I started changing my perceptions based off of love, right? First thing I had to do was to stop resisting love so much. That's the first thing I had to do. And when I did that, it opened up the door for me to really be able to understand that my resistance to love is what kept it away. My reinforcing of how I saw other people is what made those people appear that way. Because if you ever really start to think about certain things and you start to see it, like we call it synchronicity, right? You really start to look for these things, it synchronistically appears to you. So when you're looking for flaws in other people, when you're looking for reasons, to judge other people, when you're looking for reasons to reinforce past, basically just to justify how you felt in the past and how the past affected you, right? When you're so focused on the past so much and you can't really be in the moment with others, and you're looking for reasons to hold others to the past, right? I did these things, and when I changed my perception and stopped doing those things, everything changed. The people I met changed, people around me changed, I changed, right? If your perception is that you can't get in shape, right? Nothing's working for you. You're not gonna find anything that works. You have to make it work, right? You have to change your perception that you can see a way out. Once you see a way out, and for everything that you feel is holding you back, there will be a way out. You're gonna find a way out. As long as you're willing, right? You have to be real with yourself. Being real with yourself is the first step to changing your perception, because if you have perceptions that don't necessarily serve you, or reality doesn't necessarily serve you, right? You have to work on, okay, what got me to this point? What got me here in the first place? Because you do know, I knew back then And I knew when I thought everybody was out to get me, I knew back then what did that. It's just the denial and the constant reinforcement, right? Because when you start to have more and more experiences, you're like, no, I've had real experiences that reinforce this fact, but you are still choosing. You're still choosing to have that outlook, and that's what's going to keep those problems happening. So that's just really what I really wanted to say about perception is reality, right? It's all dependent on you, your ability to be real with yourself, and your ability to want things to change for the better, and so your ability to want yourself to change for the better, right? Once you have that, your reality is really in your control, you know. So, but you have to accept that it's in your control too. So that's really what I wanted to say. Rewatch the video a few times if you didn't understand it the first time around. So that it can really sink in, because the power is really in your hands when it comes to everything, right? So that's all I gotta say. I hope you enjoy the content. I wish you all luck in your journey, and peace.